Hey everyone, welcome to the latest episode of the 360 Insights HR Tech Chat. I'm Dylan Teggart, and today I'm going to be speaking with Keirsten Greggs. Keirsten
Hey.
is someone you're going to want to listen to today. She's an expert in talent acquisition and career coaching, and I think now more than ever, that's something everyone can use a little help with. Keirsten, thanks for joining us, and why don't you tell the people a little bit about yourself?
Hey, Dylan. Thanks for having me. Very excited to be here today. I am Keirsten Greggs. I've been in TA for 24 years, and I am a lead consultant for talent acquisition. I have my own company, Trap Recruiter LLC, where I bridge the gap between job seekers and employers.
Nice. And I think, there are a lot of job seekers out there right now. Um,
Mhm.
Not that we're in any sort of shortage of corporate workers, but I think in certain fields we are in a deficit of skilled, deskless workers and more specialized
Mm.
workers. Um, that's just one trend I'm seeing. Are there any sort of trends you've been noticing, or are there certain issues that continuously come across your desk?
Yeah, so most of the people, just because I think it's proximity, most of the job seekers I'm seeing are in HR and TA, which creates a whole other issue because we're on one hand saying everything is great, the economy is awesome, but companies are also having a more difficult time hiring because they're understaffed with the people who are responsible for doing the hiring. So there becomes an issue there. Lead times are taking longer. It's taking longer for us to get back to job seekers because where we maybe had 10 positions because our staff was cut, now we have 20 or 30 positions that we're recruiting for. So workloads have definitely increased for organizations where their recruiting staff has been tremendously cut down. And job seekers are feeling that on the other end because the hiring process is taking a little bit longer.
And a lot of those reductions in those departments are like still a kind of a ripple effect from COVID or from the pandemic, or is this just like a more of an economic or employment trend that just was happening
It
already?
really depends on the industry. Some of it is a result of over hiring, was what they're calling it during COVID. So a lot of, especially the tech companies, the big companies that we all know about, the ones that are coveted that everyone wants to work at, those places increased their headcount significantly, and they also increased their recruiter headcount and or they brought recruiters back into the organizations. And what we saw or like at the end of last year, even, and then even the beginning of 2024 was a huge trend, like I mentioned in the last segment, that recruiters were the ones that were being uh, the most impacted by some of those layoffs at tech companies because there just wasn't a great deal of hiring going on as organizations were looking to recalibrate, to right size their workforce, where they were looking at their workforce plans and all of that. So it was, there are certain times of year where we do that anyway, where companies do that anyway, where they, kind of downsize a little bit. But I think it was a little bit more noticeable and a little bit more heartfelt because of some of the positions that were being eliminated.
Huh, it's a bit of a vicious cycle that I guess could happen. So you're saying there's people that need to be hired, but the people
Mm-hmm.
that are also looking for jobs are the ones that
Yeah.
are meant to be doing the hiring in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So is that something that's improving at all, or is it you think it's going to be an issue for a minute?
I'm hopeful that we've seen the worst of it. But again, proximity tells me that that's not always what's going on. Like that, just because something is close to me doesn't mean that that's the norm for everyone else. But still close to me, like I said, I'm seeing folks who have been in the job market for a year. looking for work, and they're not employed. There aren't as many short-term, temporary positions for them as for them either. So it's been difficult. Uh, Overall, I think it is going to get a little better. And some of that is going to be folks needing to branch out and look beyond, perhaps their industry or even their role. And I don't necessarily mean just their role as a recruiter, but perhaps their role as a talent acquisition professional. There's other things to do in TA besides recruiting. There are opportunities where you can, lend your skills, lend your experience that would be just as impactful and just as effective and get you employed.
And I guess this is kind of where it comes back to your expertise is what would
Mhm.
you, let's say, someone's like, okay, listen, Kirsten, I need help right now. I've been, in the job market for a year and I've applied to 300 jobs and no one's getting back to me. What would you recommend? Because that is not just specifically for those, talent acquisition and HR people, but in general, seems to be a trend of corporate people
Mhm.
applying to hundreds of jobs, not getting a response. But let's maybe start with someone specifically in HR and talent acquisition who's in this dilemma. What would you recommend to them, be it, retraining or another strategy, or should they just change their strategy entirely?
I wouldn't say change entirely, but it's a difficult thing to do. There's no right answer. The only wrong answer is to do nothing. The only wrong answer is to give up. And that's not to say that you don't need a break, because looking for a job is extremely taxing. It is difficult. It's hard. It is a full-time job as well. So you do need to take some time to like readjust, to look over, the jobs that you've applied for, maybe perhaps reorganize your strategy. Maybe that's the times that you apply, maybe the companies that you're applying. Like I said, broaden your scope of, don't just go search for jobs at the the fangs. Like, don't just go search for jobs at the largest companies in your area. Really think about who are what are your must-haves? Like, what are you not willing to give up? And then align with those types of organizations. I know someone who went from working in like finance to, excuse me, to nonprofit, and it's like doing excellent, like doing well, like they love it. They were used to a more fast paced, like highly competitive environment, and now they are thriving in a role where they have a lot more autonomy, a greater work-life balance. Their mental is doing well, and again, that came out of them really prioritizing what is the best thing for me in terms of how I want to show up at work, in terms of what I need from the organization, not just what I can offer to the organization. I don't want to diminish anyone's experience or anyone's job search, which is why I'm reluctant to say like, oh, you have to do these things, because everything doesn't work for everybody. Um, Job searching, regardless of what your career field is difficult. And you could wake up one day and get the job. Like, like literally, like you could, I had that experience. I've been laid off multiple times. There have been times that I got a job before I even left the building. And there have been times that it took me a little bit longer. And yes, I employed the same tactics. I did the same things first, made the calls to my network. Hey, I'm on the market, I'm looking. And sometimes things just click very quickly. Like I said, so there were times that I got that job, I made that phone call, and the first or the second phone call was the one that was like, yep, I need you today. Like, come by. And then there were other times where they're like, well, we're reorganizing. Hey, now talk to this person. Hey, try this. Hey, I don't know. I don't have anything. Or hey, I'm looking too. So there are a lot of things that go into it. So I definitely don't want to make folks who have been on the job market for what they feel is too long, a tremendous amount of time, to feel like they're doing something wrong, or that they are, or give this perception that they're unhireable, because that's not necessarily the case. It's a matter of timing. A lot of times it's a matter of opportunities meeting your effort, and sometimes it just takes longer to click.
Sorry, just had a sound issue there for a second. Um, in terms of how companies are finding the best people, given that there is a shortage, I'm sure, the categories as to which, they're looking for hasn't changed too much, or has it? Or it has this tightening of the HR and recruitment departments really made it different how people are selecting people at all, or is it kind of the same?
Yes, but in my opinion, it's in a good way, because I think that recruiting TA teams are more focused now on attraction, selection, and retention. So they're thinking about hiring, if they're thinking about hiring externally only, for example, they're thinking about hiring that person that's going to have some type of career development, some type of talent development opportunities within their companies. So selecting that person that maybe doesn't necessarily want to go, straight up the ladder. Maybe sometimes they want to go across. Maybe they want to try different things. So we're thinking about that. We're looking at passive candidates as well. I see more recruiters that are really, really looking at the folks that they talked to years ago, the folks that they've sourced years ago, the folks that are already in their applicant tracking systems. They're starting there first, and not just when you're looking for the CEO or the CFO or the vice president of XYZ, because most of the time when we think about passive candidates, we're like, oh, we're hardwired to say that's a C-suite, like, because those people are never looking and there's only so many of them. So we have to go out and find them. But there are ABC players that are already in your system. There are ABC players that you've already talked to. And I think more recruiters are spending more time with that, because there is this idea that job seekers have a better opportunity. Those, especially the ones that are already employed, if they're looking for a job, like, you can pick up the phone and call them. And I think they're like, well, you know what? I don't need this job. I see more people talking about getting ghosted well into the interview process, and it's not just coming from one side. It's not just job seekers that are saying they're being ghosted. It's recruiters, it's hiring teams that are saying they're being ghosted as well. Like, job seekers just aren't showing up for work. Job seekers are using them to get, a higher offer. That's been going on for a while, but I think it's a lot more prevalent now. So I think we're reimagining how we are attracting talent, how we're selecting talent, and how we are going to retain that talent. And to me, that's a good thing. I mean, having this time, or having a little bit more breathing room, because either you have an abundance of candidates to choose from and you can make better decisions, or you have more time. Um, that's been a benefit to the TA field.
That's very interesting. And I know, and we spoke briefly before, for people who don't know. And one thing you mentioned, which I thought was interesting, was that with the adoption of more, software and
Mhm.
AI systems to evaluate candidates, especially like at first glance, there can be the issue of you actually start running the risk of creating a very homogenous workforce over time.
Mhm.
Could you explain how that kind of happens and what the, guardrails can be put in place to prevent that, and whether or not it's only something humans can solve, or is it even possible to program something that can avoid that from happening?
You just answered your question, because programming it is a human solving the problem, right?
That's true.
So yeah, just to answer your question, the first part of your question, I do think that oftentimes the over reliance on our tools that help us be more efficient, that help us make better hiring decisions, they learn as we learn. So if we're constantly selecting the same type of person, or that's returned from, okay, we put in our key, let's talk about sourcing, for example. We put in our sourcing criteria, or we're saying what we're looking for, and we're constantly selecting the same type of person, your AI is going to always give you that person because that's who you're looking for. So the way to kind of manipulate that is to, like you said, think about things in a more unbiased way, program things differently. Um, don't I think we have a tendency to go for the first thing. Like we're like, okay, AI, give me a blue balloon, and it's like here. And then we're like, all right, here, blue balloon. That's what I asked for. That's what I got. Like we're not doing the work to actually look at. Actually, it's a blue balloon, but we needed something that was in the shape of a cartoon animal or something, like whatever the case may be. Like we're not really going more in depth. Sometimes we're not asking the right questions. Prompts are a huge thing. AI can only give you what you've asked for. There have been times that I have, I say this, I said this before. I'm like, I don't know if I'm starting to talk like a machine or if I'm getting better at talking to machines, because there have been times I'm like, hi, please make this, I'll say like, make this sentence better. What's a better way to say this? What's a better way to ask this? And they're like, leave me alone. They're like, this is fine, go away. Like that's been the thing. So we have to spend more time really evaluating and looking at and analyzing the output from what we are asking our tools to do for us.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I feel like it'll be a bit of a tit for tat as you go. Like as
Mhm.
we get better at talking to these machines, they'll get better. I guess they're gonna learn, how to better
Mhm.
talk to us. Um, on kind of a related question, kind of circling back to what we spoke about a little bit before, is there, a reason jobs, especially on jobs posted online, which is nearly every job, um, are getting so many applicants? Obviously there's an economic tie into that, but is there a reason they're getting so many applicants? Because, and of course, like the economy and the job market has something to do with that, but is it almost the barrier for applying to a job sometimes maybe too low, where it just invites
Mm.
kind of inundation of applications, like like the LinkedIn easy apply, where it's just like send in
Yeah.
your resume. I'm convinced that almost no one ever hears back from those, that it's almost just because like you can see some, if you have like you can see that sometimes 1,000 people have applied to a single
Yeah.
role, and you don't know where they're coming from, etc. But it is because it's just one click and it's super easy. um but is that low barrier for entry making the job of HR and talent acquisition even harder because it's just this massive flood of applicants? Or and is that
Mhm.
going to ultimately lead to negative optics and experiences for the people applying, because they're like, well, no one's even reading this, it's just going into a black
Yeah.
hole?
Once again, you have answered the question with your
I don't feel like
with your
I
question. So it's both. There are pros and cons to both. Yes, it's great that more people are seeing your company. It's great that people are applying to a job. The flip side of that is that there's a percentage of those people, because of, like you said, there's greater access to jobs, there's greater access to apply, and there's anybody can do it. The gate to apply doesn't exist. The gate to review is what exists. And it's not difficult, it is time consuming for recruiters to get through those, say 500 people apply and 459 of them didn't even read the job description. They just saw a job and said, I need a job, I need a job, I need a job, I need a job, or they have bots applying for them. We have to remember that happens too. um, so it's time consuming to like weed that stuff out, but it's not hard to weed out or to evaluate who is and isn't. And then there are some times when you have the time, or that diamond in the rough that applied for your job actually, is more qualified for a different job that you have, or one that you're about to open. So getting candidates in is not necessarily a bad thing, but it can be a time consuming thing. It can flood you and it can take you off course, which is why we have tools, and we want to use AI tools that tell us which of these we should spend our time or prioritize above others. What was the second part of your question?
Second
You know,
part
I'm older.
was,
I forget. I'm older. I forget.
oh yeah, you seem so old. Yeah, yeah. No, but the second part was, will that repeated experience of going online, applying lead to kind of a negative feedback loop for someone that's applying, where they're to the point of saying, what's the point of even applying to these jobs? No one's ever looking at it anyway, because I can see 1,000 people have applied and it's been a month and the job's still open, or that they're just going to give up on that, or that approach in general. And what would you say to someone who's in that position, kind of just like ready to throw in the towel for online applications? And would you recommend a different strategy if you think it is right for them to
Wow.
stop doing that?
Again, that's a tough one. So I'm one of those people who doesn't believe in ghosting at the apply. I believe that ghosting happens when you've already had a conversation. Um, and I know that there's this whole thing about ghost jobs and things that aren't real, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a position that's open that needs to be filled, and that there are candidates there. Unfortunately, recruiters, if they have 1,500 people that have applied to a certain position, it's very difficult to give every single person that high touch that they may or may not desire. Like, hey, I want a phone call. I want to know why I wasn't qualified for this job. I don't want that automated message. And that's not always reasonable to ask for someone who's trying to do a job, which is to get a position filled. So, does it make a company look bad at that stage? No. It makes a company look bad when you've been in an interview process that's 6 rounds, um, sign a contract, give me your social security number, do a day's worth of projects for me that's actually solving a real problem at my organization. You don't pay me for it. You don't get back to me, and then I don't hear from you again. That's a bad impression. Having jobs open, um, having the same job open over and over again is another bad impression, because you didn't do a good job hiring. You didn't do a good job selecting the right person. But there is not going to be a time where people don't apply for jobs that need jobs. And for recruiters, if you're not getting anyone to apply to your jobs, that's a great time for you to go look for those, like I said, those passive candidates. That's a great time for you to do some sourcing. Recruiting is a two-way thing. It's not just post and pray. It's not just post and wait for people to come in. Recruiting is a job. Like, you need to do something. You don't need to just wait for people to come to you. Sometimes you have to go out and look for them. Sometimes you have to go out and connect with people. You have to go out and talk to other folks. Like, you can't just wait for someone to apply to your jobs. No.
And what would you say is kind of if there even is a number on this, what would you say is the breakdown between uh places that are actively needing to go out and look for people, like they have to take the initiative, versus
100%. No question. 100%.
okay. And
I don't think there's ever a recruiting strategy that should be all come to me. No, absolutely not.
Even for larger like the Googles, the Facebooks, they're going after people, you think?
Absolutely. Absolutely. They're going after people more so. They're going after their competitors. They are extremely uh, refined in who they want in their organization. They know what schools they target. They know what organizations they target. They know what geographic locations they want to target. They are 100% doing sourcing. Absolutely.
And at that level, do they tend to follow, like, and this is going to kind of lead into my next question, a certain set of best practices or principles across all of these organizations? Like they're all doing, like you're saying, kind of like headhunting people, but then do they all lead into the same methods of kind of sieving through those people? Are they all using, the same screenings, the same tests, conceptually, like where they're kind of like, okay, we found X candidate.
I think their things are similar. I mean, I think that organizations that are quote unquote successful at hiring definitely follow trends and definitely do some of the same things. Absolutely.
And this now leading into my next question is, like all these pre-employment screenings,
Mhm.
like social media screenings, communication tests,
Yeah.
and kind of just like you were saying before, like a day's work, like a trail essentially.
Mhm.
People really, I think people understand, like, the basic background check, social media screening.
Mhm.
But I do feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, that most people do not like to have to do those like tests, like where you kind of have to work a day for free. Is there
No.
any way around that where there's other ways to test people opposed to just essentially, because I feel like a lot of people who do those and don't make it through feel very used. They're kind of like, what, well, I did all this work. What are they going to do with my intellectual property on this test? Are they just taking it and using it to their own benefit while just not hiring me? Is there any way to cultivate a more honest, or at least a more reciprocal relationship between the candidate and the company when kind of undergoing that kind of test?
That is an excellent question. Like that is an excellent question. So, first and foremost, you one of the things you said was feeling like they're being used or like they were blindsided. So, you need to know, and this is to job seekers, you need to know what the actual recruitment process is. Like you need to know like what the steps are. They're going to do an initial phone screen. You're going to do an on-site interview or a virtual interview, depending on how they're set up. You're going to do a final assessment or a final talk. Like you need to know what the actual interview process is, and if before you even do that first interview with a hiring team, you have already decided I am not interested in doing any test, then don't move forward. But organizations, I'm going to be gracious here, tell people up front, this is this is what we do when we are ready to hire someone, or when we're recruiting people, I should say.
Interesting. And to put people maybe at ease about the social media screening aspect of this,
Hmm.
I know there's people know that it's occurring. I think because everyone can kind of be Google search these days.
Yeah.
Um, but how much is that human? Like, how much is that a human job versus like a technology job? Like, are people
It used to be a
relying?
human job, meaning like someone like me would be taking the time to look at someone's social media, and see what was posted, but that might have adverse impact, that might reveal a personality trait that didn't work out. But you have to remember, like I came from the defense and intel side of things, so we were already being nosy. We have we had very strict guidelines, and people that wanted to work there knew that, especially those that had security clearances. So they already knew what information they should and should not put on the internet, especially for companies. I mean, this is not just a job seeker issue. This is an employee issue too. Most companies have internet policies, or they have social media policies that they expect their employees to follow. I mean, you sign your handbook, the first day of work, you sign a social media policy that you're not going to talk crap about the job, you're not going to give away trade secrets, like all that stuff that seems like seems like, regular things. And you'll see people that be like, I'm not representing my company when I post this. I'm not doing anything when I post this. I don't know if you're on TikTok. That might be a sore subject for people. I am not, but I see a lot of TikTok content. And there was a young lady who works at Chick-fil-A. She still works there, but she would be doing posts, like doing reviews of whatever lunch she had that day. And she was getting like 2 million views, this many views. And corporate got in touch with her and said that she was not to do that anymore. She didn't get fired or anything like that, but it was against their policy to do this content without their permission. You know what I'm saying? Like to be promoting their brand in a way, even though it was extremely positive, people loved it and all of that. That wasn't what her job was at the company. So she went against the policy. Something like that would not be a red flag. And it actually became a green flag for another company, because another organization, another food chain reached out to her and asked her to do some things for them, like gave her free food, said, hey, here's some things. And they took advantage of her being popular. They took advantage of her social media presence to bring customers to themselves. And this doesn't necessarily take customers away from Chick-fil-A either, because they're both being talked about. I'm talking about them right now, so it is what it is. For most people that aren't doing anything crazy, they don't have anything to worry about anyway. I mean, like, do you really spend your days like worrying about what you posted on social media?
Me in particular?
Yeah.
No. My social media is all related to other stuff. Yeah, not
Yeah.
it's all very focused on a specific subject, but not related to work at all.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like, you're not out here like saying, "Hey, I'm going to kill everyone" on social media. So why are you worried? Why are you worried about that? Today, technology is doing that, and they're looking for particular things. Like I said, threats, certain language, um, certain, like, even the other social media profiles that you might follow. Like if you're following people who are very dangerous, who are planning to overthrow the government, anything like that, like that's going to be an issue. Yeah, I'm not going to want you to perhaps I'm not going to want you to come into my company. But like I said, there's employees that have those issues as well. I have been involved in, investigations where current employees have done and said things on social media that have cost them their job.
Yeah, I agree that in the extreme cases, it definitely makes a lot of sense, because just like if there was a rumor going around at work that so and so was doing some crazy thing outside of work, it's kind of the same. It's kind of the same method of, broken telephone, I suppose, or whatever, however lines of communication that come into work, be it gossip or just people talking about someone they work with. So I
Yeah.
guess there's really no difference with that. I only ask just because of, I feel, I guess from a privacy perspective, some people may feel like
Mm.
that is intruding on their privacy and that they're being judged on their private life. And then it becomes a case of like, where does the line end? Where if the lines between work life and private life, begin to become blurred, and where you're being judged or and this is maybe this is like, it's pulling the thread kind of situation. This isn't
Yeah.
happening, but uh, or maybe it is happening, but it could lead to a case where people feel like their privacy is maybe being put at risk, or their private life is being infused into their work life when it's just maybe a misunderstanding or something. But I'm imagining those
Yeah.
cases are reviewed.
Yeah. Those are fewer far between. And there are protections in place that do protect your privacy, uh, even to the point that you're not required to provide your employer in in some instances with your social media handle. Like it has nothing to do with your job. And like I said, 99% of the people aren't doing anything on social media or aren't portraying anything on social media that is going to be an issue for your organization anyway.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, Kirsten, thank you so much. Just before we wrap up, do you mind telling people what you have going on, any future plans, and where people can find you?
Yeah. Future plans. Okay. Later today or like, no,
Yeah, what are you having for
anything.
lunch? No, like for
That's a good question. That's a good question too. I don't know. But so I will be leading a panel at TA Week in July. So anyone that wants to come and sign up for TA Week, please check that out. Also, you can find me on social media anywhere at Trap Recruiter. My website, traprecruiter.com. I'm on Instagram ish. I'm on X, formerly known as Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn, either at Trap Recruiter or my name, Keirsten Greggs. They both lead to the same place. And I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Threads. Yeah.
That's what I don't hear too often, but you got every angle covered here.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, that's great. And I'm sure people are going to be very intrigued after this conversation. And hopefully some people reach out to you because you have so much information. I feel like we just kind of hit the tip of the iceberg here.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll have some more conversations in the future and get all that knowledge onto
Looking
paper
forward
or
to it.
recording here, not on paper, but into the digital world, because I feel like there were so many more questions I would love to ask you, but
Well, maybe you
yeah,
come on Trap Chat and we
maybe I
talk about
will.
that. Yeah.
Nice. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. And Kirsten, thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.